Thanks, Andrew. In the meantime, President Biden announcing a deal for the Port of Los Angeles to operate 24/7 in an attempt to try and ease a shipping container backup that's emerged as key evidence of America's strained supply chain. California's Los Angeles and Long Beach ports handle 40% of America's inbound containers. Long Beach moved to round-the-clock operations a few weeks ago. And joining us right now to talk about getting America's supply chain running smoothly again is Mario Cordero. He's the Port of Long Beach Executive Director. And Mario, thanks so much for being here today. This is a problem that we have been kind of trying to get our arms around, and I know you know much more about it. So why don't you just tell us what's happening? Why are we facing these backlogs at this point?
Well, thank you for having me. Well, first of all, what we have before us is a national crisis of a disrupted supply chain.
A national crisis of a disrupted supply chain. How do we fix it? It can't be one or two simple solutions. This is, from everything I hear, kind of an accordion that's had a lot of different things that have come into play. What are some of those issues?
Well, certainly, it's very complex, but suffice to say that during the COVID era, we've had market aberration and, of course, now the bottlenecks in the supply chain. So as an example, yesterday at the nation's largest port complex here at the Port of Long Beach and Port of LA, we had 52 vessels waiting to get in to the port. And we had as high as 70 a couple of weeks ago. So to put that in the proper context, in normal times, we have zero, maybe one or two at best. So obviously this has caused delays, and overall the cost of transportation and shipping in the global markets has skyrocketed. And needless to say that when it comes to the level of a factor in monetary policy in this nation, and of course, President Biden weighed in yesterday on this question. So for the Port of Long Beach perspective, we are very pleased that the supply chain transformation that needs to be had with regard to a 24/7 concept is no longer a vision. It's something we need to do as quick as possible.
Ports in Asia and in Europe have been 24/7 for a while. What has kept us from that same situation?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, as you know, the Port of Long Beach has advocated this concept for a couple of years, and this is even before the crisis we had. So I think bottom line, anytime you have an industry that gets out of their comfort zone, there's always challenges. But I think, to be quite frank, cost is an issue, absolutely. However, what's the cost of doing nothing? And again, the cost of doing nothing is what we have before us. So obviously, that's not the option.
Cost is the issue because if you're working 24/7, you have to pay more to the union workers on the port. You have to pay more to the truckers. You have to pay more to everybody along the line. Is that the issue, labor costs?
Labor cost is a big factor. But again, one of the things that we have seen about labor, particularly the men and women who work on the docks, ever since the COVID pandemic commenced here in early spring of 2020, these men and women have been working on the docks day in and day out. So I think, again, the question is, what's the cost of doing nothing? Certainly, it's a lot more than paying labor. I think what they properly should be paid with regard to a third shift, and I'm talking about a shift that's from 3 to 7 in the morning. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the key factor.
Yeah, and Mario, is this something that you anticipate is going to last? Because the Biden administration, the proposals that they've kind of put forth and the promises that the retail partners have made to this point, the Walmarts and the Targets, that's really for the next 90 days. Is this something that you see just to get us through this big crunch and then we can go back to the old way of operating? Or is this something that is just going to be a way of operating if you've been pushing for this even before COVID hit?
Well, there's two things to that. Number one, Long Beach has been pushing for that even before COVID hit. And number two, the fact of the matter is, as you mentioned, other parts of the world are 24/7. In fact, the containers that you referenced, 40% of the nation's containers loaded imports from Asia come into this complex. And where do they come from? Asia. And the motto there is 24/7, which is part of a reason as to why we have the bottleneck when they come to the West Coast here in the United States, or for that matter, at any port in the USA. So I think it's something that, for now, it's imperative that we move forward to try to change the dynamics here. And as to whether it should continue, in my opinion, let me just say this. At this nation's complex, most significant complex here, we're going to move 20 million TEU containers forecasted between Long Beach and Los Angeles in 2021. That number is not going to get any less in the future, whether it's crisis or no crisis. So I think for me and for us here in Long Beach, this is the concept that should be explored in terms of how we move forward as to best practices to move that kind of volume and the importance of that cargo to the nation and to the American shipper and consumer.